Hey everybody, let's look at 55. This is a terrible name for a chapter. Complex fractions, that sounds terrible. Makes it sound like they're really hard. Well, let's just rewrite that here. Not complex fractions, but I don't know. Let's call them joyful fractions. That sounds a little bit more uplifting. Okay, joyful fractions, just a typo on Saxon's part. Well, like most of the stuff we do in algebra, it goes back to actual numbers where somebody goes, hey, this works every time. We can do it with A's and X's and Y's and with all this jazz. So look at this. You tell me how to do this problem. Let's say you're explaining to a younger sibling or something like that. How would you explain it to them without using violence? Okay. Well, obviously you go like this, you go, okay, if you're dividing, okay, first we'll call that 6 over 1, right? And if you divide a fraction, you take the second fraction and you flip it, and then you multiply, and then you go, oh, that's going to be 5 on top, and then 8 times 6, and there you go, and you got it, okay. And then your younger sibling, this is where you can help yourself to a little bit of money from your sibling's jar, or piggy bank, or whatever, okay. All right, well, if it works for that, then we do exactly the same thing with x's and y's. There's nothing new. So when you see something like this, it's not complicated. You just do exactly like you would do any other fraction you ever work with in your entire life, as long as you did all those fraction problems correctly and they weren't complex. Okay, so copy this down. You got a divided by, or a over b divided by c. And again, you can do this c over 1. You can always do that. So you can just rewrite this thing. Go a over b. And of course you divide, which means you flip the second fraction and you multiply. So you're going to go not c over 1, but 1 over c. And then you do exactly the same thing you've always done with fractions. Tops get multiplied, bottoms, and then you have a over bc, and that's it. That's all you need to do. Done. Okay. All right, let's do another one. Some of these in your book you might be a little confused about which is the big fraction bar. Here, I'll try to make it bigger for you so it's a little clearer. Okay, so that's your problem. So you have a over b divided by c. And again, don't forget, you can always, put c over 1 if you want to, or put fractions over 1 to make it easier to piddle with. But it's the same thing you always do. So we got an a over b. If you divide a fraction, that means you take the second fraction and you flip it, 1 over c. And you multiply it, boom, like that, and a times 1, and that's BC. There we go, and we just did one just like that. So let's look at a second one. All right, take a second and copy this down. If you need to pause it, go ahead and pause. All right, well, let's simplify this thing. Same old thing, this makes it a little easier here to go ahead and just flip the second one and multiply. 1 over b, you flip, b over 1. Multiply straight across, 1 times b. C times 1, done. That's all there is to it. All right, simple enough. Okay, here's another one. Now we have, I'll make this a big fraction here, a divided by 1 over c. And it's the same thing. If you want to do it like this, a divided by 1 over c is the same thing as a times c over 1, right? And if you want to write it over 1 over here, that's fine as well. So going straight across, a times c, 1 times 1 is 1. No point in writing divided by 1 because it's just going to be the same thing. So there's your answer. That's all there is to it. All right, here's where it gets more interesting. But it still isn't bad. You do exactly the same thing you've always done. So take a sec, copy that down, pause it if you need to. All right, well, I mean, it's the same thing. You just take the second, fraction, flip it, and multiply. So times, and then a over x is the top now, and the b is on the bottom. And then x times b is a piece of cake. That's just going to be xb. The only thing you're going to have to piddle with is, distributing the a between the a and the x. So if you want to mentally kind of go like this, and maybe you can do it like that and just kind of eat like there. A times a is a squared. 8 times x is ax. And we got it over 1 fraction. Yoink, we're done. That's all there is to it. Okay. All right, let's try You have A, B, C, and D for practice problems. And give those a whirl and see what you get. Try A first. Okay, x over m divided by d. We can call it d over 1 if you want. And that'll be x over m times 1 over d, which will just be x on top and then md on the bottom. All right, pause it and try b. Okay, 1 over r, we can just rewrite and just write it like this, 1 over r times, and then we'll write, instead of this, we're dividing, we're going to go z over 1 this time. So we have 1 times z is z, r times 1 is r, and that is it. That's all there is to it. Okay, pause it and try c. All right, c is this fraction over that fraction. I'm just going to not bother to do the whole thing. I'll just times it by not b over d, but d over b. So n times d, and then a times b, and then there you go. That's it. Okay, pause it and try d. Okay. The only thing weird about d is that there isn't a 1 over the w, so that's potentially a little confusing, but we can take care of it. I mean, let's just go ahead and do a w. We'll call it w over 1. Okay, we're dividing by this fraction, which means we're multiplying by the reciprocal of that fraction, which is w plus c over 1. This is a wash. Don't worry about dividing by 1 times 1. Just focus on this part right here. And all you're doing is just distributing that w across the w and to the other end of the c there. So w times w, w squared. W times c, wc, and that is it. We're done. Okay? All right. Hope that went well. Thanks. See you guys next time.